Hello and welcome to our January More Than Bread broadcast. And today we are very excited to bring someone on that I think a lot of you are going to be very interested in hearing about. An exciting ministry that is bringing Bible education and Bible training to the schools in our neighborhoods. And it started out in Ohio, drifted over into Indiana, and now it's nationwide. This afternoon, I am speaking with Kristin Vandagriff. Kristin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Greg. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, good to have you here. Your official title, you are the state director for the state of Florida, correct?
Yes, correct.
Good, good, good. Well, we want to jump right into this. We want to talk about LifeWise and what you do. Why is why does LifeWise even exist? When did it get started? And tell us about your purpose, what you're really trying to do with LifeWise.
Yes, absolutely. So as you said, our mission with LifeWise Academy is to bring Bible education to our public school students during school hours. And, really why we exist, well, students need the Word of God. They need the Bible. Right now we know amongst our youth, we're seeing all-time highs of depression, anxiety, tragically suicide, and at the same time, all-time lows of church attendance, professions of faith, and biblical literacy. So we know this is an important time. When we kind of think back to how this kind of all got started, it's interesting. So back in 1952, so we're backing it up more than 70 years, there was a Supreme Court ruling on the federal level called Zorak v. Clausen. And essentially what it says is that our public school students can be released from their public school day for religious instruction if three core criteria are met. So they need to be off school property, privately funded, and parent permitted. So parents sign a permission slip. And then if that is done, essentially, students can actually hear the word of God in their school day. So that was a ruling that was there, kind of little known. And what happened was our CEO and founder, Joel Penton, back in 2012, he was back in Van Wert, his hometown in Ohio, and he actually saw this release time religious instruction program happening in Van Wert. So a local church actually ended up having 95% of the entire school enrolled in this program, hearing the Word of God weekly. That ended up being over 600 kids. And it really struck him. He said, gosh, if this is legal and impactful, because we were hearing stories from the school administrators, the families, these kids' lives were transformed. It really kind of became this riddle of LifeWise going, if it's impactful and legal, why aren't we seeing this all throughout America? If we're able to have a McDonald's, churches, if we're able to have YMCAs, all these different things, how is it that we haven't had our churches, our Christians in these communities coming together to really be able to offer this for our public school students as an opportunity to hear the word of God? So that was really kind of what struck the first idea, essentially about LifeWise.
I'm going to throw in a little personal thing here. My grandmother was a school teacher, and she lived to be well in her mid 90s, and when she passed away, one of her students, which I didn't know, I knew Tom for a long time, but I didn't know that my grandmother had taught him in school.
Mm.
And we were standing back at the funeral home. And I want to share this with you because it kind of ties right into what you're doing. And he goes, Greg, he goes, your grandmother was such a great lady. And, if the schools were run the same way today as they were when she had us in classroom, they wouldn't need metal detectors and stuff at the doors. And he said she started her school day the same way every day. First thing she did was that we did Pledge of Allegiance. And then she read something out of the Bible. And then she prayed over all those kids every day. And he goes, I never will forget it. Tom was well in his 70s then. So it gives you an idea of what happens when that seed gets planted. It never goes away. And
Mm.
and that's what I'm so encouraged about LifeWise. When I first heard about it, I thought, this is something we want to make sure that we help get out in the communities. Um, I want you to expand on that a little bit because I know it's one thing that's big for LifeWise, and maybe we don't think about it a whole lot. Um, but kids go to class and they may not be going to church. Am I correct?
Yes, correct. And,
And
it's actually
so,
quite, oh, sorry. Continue.
yeah. And so when they start getting kind of on fire for listening to the word and understanding that, hey, this is real, they come home and ask their parents.
Yeah, and it's the story that you shared also, Greg. So it reminds me both what you just shared and then previous two really important impact stories that we actually have on our LifeWise website under our video section. And the one that really hits on what you just shared, Christian's story. And so essentially his mother, Bethany, she got this flyer in the mail for a local LifeWise program and kind of figured, well, it's during the school day. Bible education, character development couldn't hurt. She signs her son Christian up and he comes to know Jesus and he brings his whole entire family to church. And now they're engaged in their church, they're engaged in their Bible study, the LifeWise program. It's changed an entire household. But we also have a story about Julie, who very much like what, the story that you shared, Greg, she had had an experience just knowing her grandmother and the Bible education program that her grandmother run. And so at her grandmother's funeral, the pastor asked everyone that has come to know Jesus from this woman's Bible education program, please stand up. Two-thirds of that entire auditorium stood up. And it was really that connection to what was done then. And obviously here with LifeWise and these programs, it's making an eternal impact, an eternal legacy that, it changes obviously the life of this child, but also in many ways, it can change the life of a whole household.
And that's awesome. It's just awesome to see how God works through the mouth of babes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Take a moment, if you would, and try to expand on. I know you, when you first opened up, you talked about how this is done during school hours, but can
Yes.
you give us maybe a daily or weekly? Here's what a LifeWise day looks like in the life of the children in the school and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I actually was able to just join a LifeWise program right before Christmas, and they were learning the character trait, the biblical moral value of hope, and they were learning it through the nativity story. And so the day started with our LifeWise bus driver and the teacher and the volunteers heading over to the school, picking up their class full of kids that were ready to go to the LifeWise program. They get to talk with the kids about the lesson that they're going to be learning about. Sometimes they do some praise and worship on the bus. But then when they get to the church to be able to go through the Bible education program, they're going through the lesson. In this case, they actually got to all act out the nativity story. All the kids got to have different parts and act that out. But I think what really strikes me, they're learning great biblical morals and character traits, but there's also the time for prayer requests. And that is a time where you see these kids that many of which are walking through some really hard things. They actually get to feel the love of God through another person and being able to have those hard things they're walking through prayed over. So that I feel like is just absolutely huge. And it was a blessing to get to be there to see the impact that has on those kids. But then obviously they have their bus driver and their teacher and their volunteers take them back over to the school. So that's really what that looks like over the course of about an hour once a week. They get that Bible education. So, the lesson, they get the interactive engagement piece and the prayer request time and praise and worship. So really a lot of things jam packed into that hour.
Know that you primarily, and you do work in the state of Florida because
I
you're the
do.
state director here.
Yes.
But today you are speaking to a wider audience. We have people listening in for all kinds of states here in the United States. So, um, if you would share with us where you're reaching to right now, and maybe touch on some cities that we might be surprised that LifeWise is in, and how God is moving throughout the nation, because I know this ministry has grown from its
Yes.
Ohio roots and making a big splash.
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned, obviously our founder and CEO was blown away by what he saw in Van Wert. And so in 2019-2020 school year, after they had founded LifeWise to be this plug and play model, as you said, for communities all across the nation, they started piloting in Ohio in a couple of communities. What they really started seeing, it was just amazing. So they're again seeing the high enrollment, they're seeing lives transformed, but we started getting calls from school districts that were neighboring these pilot school districts saying, we're having parents take their kids out of our school district, put them in the other school district for Bible education. Can you expand to us? We said, okay, we'll get right on that. And that really led us to expanding, like you said, outside of the state of Ohio into Indiana. Around this time, we said, gosh, God's up to something. We need to make a goal. So we need a 5-year goal. We said, okay, let's try to be in 25 schools by 2025, right? 25 by 25 sounds pretty cute. So we're excited about that. And wouldn't you know it, in just 1 year, instead of 5, God already had us in 36 schools. So he saw our plans and he laughed at it. We started seeing some really major milestones. So we saw suburbs. We started seeing programs there in our inner cities. It has just bloomed. And ultimately, we said, well, we need to redraw this 5-year goal. And we said, we want to do this 1,000 schools campaign. We want to be in 1,000 schools, over those 5 years. And I will tell you, we're not even to that point yet. And we are already confirmed in over 1,300 schools across 36 states. So from Alaska and Hawaii to here in Florida, from California to New York, we are seeing all kinds of excitement for folks being able to have a Bible education program like this. And for, cities, we have one in LA even. So it's pretty exciting when you think about it. It's amazing to see what God has done. And, I share these numbers and the amount of states that we are starting to see interest in, really just to be able to show that this model can work anywhere across the nation, from our rural and remote regions to the inner cities and to our suburbs. We have found that this works everywhere. And it's pretty exciting to see what God is doing.
I was so glad to hear you mention LA because you know, that probably wouldn't be one that everybody would think. But just imagine what can happen there in California and some of our big cities across the nation when God gets into one house and it gets into another house and his word gets into another house and you know how it goes. And so I think
Yes.
it's more than just looking at, one thing that I want to make sure that we make sure everybody knows today that this isn't just for the kids. It's for the families and the communities. And I think LifeWise has done a very good job of reaching into the communities. And speaking of which, I know there's communities you want to grow in the state of Florida, as well as the other, states in the United States. Typically, walk me through how can that happen? Those of us that are listening today, whether it's in Tennessee, Florida, Indiana, Texas, Ohio, wherever it may be, kind of speak to that for a minute. I like what I'm hearing. What can I do?
No, exactly. There's so much opportunity right now. So, interestingly enough, our newest goal is, as LifeWise nationally, to be able to reach all 50 million public school children across the nation. That's essentially 90,000 school buildings and 13,000 school districts, right? So we need each and every one of our listeners to think about how they might be able to engage, how people they know might be able to engage in sharing that. Here in Florida, we are seeing so much increase as far as interest. So there's a lot of opportunity here. I think the biggest piece is to figure out where your school, where your local community is at when it comes to LifeWise. And so, as the Florida State Director, a big reason I was hired is part of this kind of statewide rollout plan. And so we have kind of a 10-step process to launching a program. And we really start in what we call is an amplification stage. So we start by making sure that there's community interest signatures in each community. So people like yourself saying, hey, I'm voicing my support for a Bible education program in my area. Then that turns to an equip phase, which is where we really look to identify local leaders who want to step up and help plan for a local program. So from there, it moves into ultimately culminating in a program director being hired for that program and implementation stage, where essentially we're launching a program and we're making sure that it's self-sustaining year after year. And so I encourage folks, and I know we'll make sure that everybody gets the link, but going to lifewise.org, you're going to see right on the front page, find your school. The most direct way to get there is lifewise.org/interest. And you're going to put in your school, and it's going to tell you, are you in the stage where you're actually trying to get signatures? Maybe that's where you can actually share the community interest link with everyone that lives, works, and worships in your area. Try to get it to that 50 signatures and get it moving on to the planning phase. If it is in that stage where it needs local leaders, that's where folks could actually say, hey, I want to take about 6 to 12 weeks, and I want to be part of meeting weekly virtually with a LifeWise program coach to plan for a program in my area. And if you are one of the lucky ones that it already says it's at that implementation stage and it's enrolling kids, it might be one where you could enroll kids that you have that are in that school, or friends' children, spreading the word about that. Again, so many opportunities, whether you're here in Florida or across the nation, to make sure that there's a Bible education program in your area.
Yes, we will be sharing all of this information here on the screen here for folks to be able to know how to get in touch with LifeWise. And I want to encourage our audience. You have heart for kids, grandkids, family members. You want to be able to help your community get stronger with the Word of God. It starts with children, and take some time to reach out to LifeWise, because they are changing the backdrop of America just one child at a time, and that's what we need. Kristin, I want to thank you for today, and before we close, I want to see if there's anything else you would like to add.
Oh, absolutely. So one thing that I would love the audience to be able to know about is that if you want to learn more about LifeWise, even above and beyond, go into the website, figuring out what area your school is at in regards to its status. I really encourage folks to check out lifewise.org/off-school property. So back in October, LifeWise actually launched its movie, Off-School Property, in theaters nationwide. And I'm very excited to say that beginning January 15th, it will be available on Angel Studios for free streaming. So it will talk about essentially over the last couple decades how our nation systematically removed the Bible from the public school day. And then really looking at the opportunity of LifeWise to be able to offer this Bible education for our public school students during school hours. So it's a very impactful film. Encourage folks to check that website out if you want to see the movie trailer, and then learn how you can also stream it on Angel Studios. And please share away.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today and appreciate your efforts with LifeWise, and we will just continue to pray that God continues to use you. And again, thank you so much for being part of our audience participation today, and thank you for the interview. And we just hope that this will spur people to contact you.
Thank you so much, Greg. It was great to join you all today.
We all know it can be a real challenge to find businesses you can really trust. Now you can. ChristianCommunityConnect.com is the easiest way to find honest, ethical, and reliable businesses in your area. It's so easy. Just go to ChristianCommunityConnect.com and enter your zip code. And ta-da! There's a list of reputable businesses that you can feel confident in. If you operate a Christian business and would like to become part of our growing community, please contact us today at ChristianCommunityConnect.com. You can get listed for just $1 a day. Get connected with your community and grow your business today at ChristianCommunityConnect.com.